Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Tinnitist TV. Today, I am talking with Ben Delacour. You know, some artists always look on the bright side. Ben Delacour is definitely not one of them. This Nashville singer-songwriter style, quite rightly dubbed Americana noir, exists much closer to the dark end of the lyrical spectrum, in a netherworld populated by characters coping with death, suicide, drug addiction, depression, and other dire straits. If Townes Van Zandt, Warren Zevon, Jason Isbell, Steve Earle, and Tom Waits wrote songs together, they might sound a little like Delacour's beautifully grim and uncompromising works. Listen to his newest album, Sweet Anhedonia, and hear for yourself. Produced by enigmatic, eccentric Jim White, it's Ben's most vivid and fully realized work to date, and an album that will undoubtedly take up permanent residence in your brain, heart, and soul. From his latest tour supporting Peter Case, Delacour zoomed in to discuss songwriting, recording with White, his colorful past as a boxer and heavy metal guitarist, and much more. Enjoy. Ben Delacour, it is nice to meet you, man.
Good to meet you too.
Yeah, we have exchanged many emails, but never spoken
Yeah.
face to face, even virtually. So, well,
No.
we are here, of course, to talk about your latest album, Sweet Anhedonia.
Yeah.
Fourth album, fifth album? I can't remember.
Um, it's well, it's technically like my fifth, but I kind of tend to pretend that the first one doesn't exist because I'm very ashamed of it. I don't. I haven't taken it off. Because I released the first few on just like self-release on our own little album collective label collective thing, so I have access to those for like taking them down or putting them back up. So um I have thought about taking it down a bunch of times, but then every now and then someone will send me a message or like an email or something, or contact me through some form of social media being like, oh man, like I love this song, so and it's one of the ones from the first record. And so I'm like, well, I can just live with it being, a terrible album, and just, I don't want to, you never know who's gonna
Connect,
connect
yeah.
to some,
I
right?
think it's also good to leave your least favorite album up there. It's good for your ego. Keeps you
I,
humble.
yeah, there's really not enough things to humble you as a musician out there. You're right. So, it's good to remind yourself.
Okay, fair enough. You got me there. Yeah,
No, but
the one dim light in your otherwise shimmering existence of independent music. All right.
right, when you're riding high on the big folk dollar, it's easy to let your ego get carried away.
Sure. Well, talking about the light and the dark, this, like most of your stuff, this is a really, really dark album, for the most part. There are lighter moments. I mean, there is one song about how someone says they're not going to try and kill themselves again, but for the most part, your stuff is kind of bleak and unrelenting at times.
I mean,
Um, Go for it.
I think that I don't know. I mean, I think that there's um yeah, I mean there's definitely bleakness there, but I don't know. I try to, because I think I am a hopeful person in a lot of ways, and like the last sound on the record is my daughter laughing,
Yeah.
and that last song I think is a very hopeful song. And I think, there's I think the thing about stories, right, is for a story to be compelling, there has to be um not only like tension, but there has to be some kind of like deep conflict, and it doesn't necessarily have to resolve. And I think if you're going to reflect reality, a lot of things don't resolve, or they do resolve, but in a way that maybe is not what you expected or ideal. But I think that by that same token, it's like that's the way you honor, I mean, these are all fictional stories, but like I feel like the characters are real and alive, and so I have to honor them by telling their story without trying to shoehorn a Disney type ending into there, you know.
Yeah, but
Um,
I was going to say it's interesting though because yeah, you are obviously not walking around cutting yourself on a daily basis,
no,
anything like that. So I mean, is it just have you always written kind of darker material? Is it just sort of what comes out naturally?
yeah, I mean, I've never set out, or I don't know, maybe when I was very young, but I've never kind of set out to um like deliberately write in any kind of you know I mean, I set out to deliberately not write certain kind of songs, which were, yeah, I know that when I hear songs that are just like everyone's talking about how great everything is, it makes me feel more alone, so I deliberately, I mean, unless a song like that came out, which kind of the last song feels like that to me, and I was like, cool, that's how I was feeling, that's just a song that came out. Um but no, I mean, I just think that that's what I've always been attracted to, is the darker side of things, and there's nothing I detest more though in songwriters, when you can tell, like when someone is thinking they're writing really sad songs, but they're just writing songs about how a girl or a guy made them sad, and they're trying to like manipulate the audience, and they're like, oh, I'm going to share my very deep journal entries that everyone really must hear, and that is going to be super compelling to everybody, and it's, to me, that's just bad songwriting for the most part. And but if that's what that person felt like they needed to do, it's fine. But for me, that's kind of never something that I felt like I needed or or wanted to do.
No, I
um
mean, and there's not a lot of interestingly enough, there's not a lot of heartache on this album, really. There's more drugs and death and
yeah,
failure and loss and those kinds of things. So it's definitely, yeah, it's not a romantic album by any stretch of the imagination. Did you grow up like listening to I don't know, Townes Van Zandt and people of that ilk? Was that sort of your formative
yeah, I mean, I think my very, very formative years were like um stuff like Jimi Hendrix and the Everly Brothers, and Elvis and stuff like that. And then when I got into my teens, I discovered, Towns, and more like Leonard Cohen and all that kind of stuff. But I was also like a huge metalhead from when I was a kid. My brother and I were playing a metal band and stuff when we were like 11 years old, 10, 11 years old. And
what kind of metal?
it was kind of like doom metal.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Like I got like
Of course.
that's, yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I've always kind of gravitated, I guess, towards yeah, I mean, I grew up listening to a lot of, and Dylan was some of my earliest memories, of course. My parents had a lot of cool music, and then I just kind of kept exploring from there. But yeah, I like all kinds of stuff. I don't only listen to dark, stuff. And I think I always kind of gravitate in literature to, I don't know, a lot of the things that people think are dark, maybe like a lot of Toni Morrison novels, or um, Raymond Carver, people like that. I don't find them, or there's a lot of hope and like human, love and connection on a kind of micro level, as opposed to this big overarching hopeful cosmic universe, which is not something I've ever been able to discover in my personal uh you know experience, but that's not where you look for love and hope. You look for it in the crevices, and in the little cracks. And it's kind of like Numbers Game to me is a love song.
Mm.
I think that's a really hopeful song in my mind. I mean, I know that I understand that a lot of people might not see it that way, but you know what I mean. And like Suicide of Town, that's a kind of a love song. So it's there, and yeah, but huh?
It's all how you look at it. It's all a matter of perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's life, right? I think if you're a creative person, you look for uh the little human moments that you see. It's like old people being sweet to each other, or people sharing a cigarette, just little things, and there's love and hope everywhere. I
Yeah.
think so. I see a lot of love and hope in the world.
Good.
Maybe not
Glad
in
to
a
hear it.
greater. Yeah. I think people expect me to be a lot less goofy than I am, but I'm a goofy bitch, man. I can't help it.
There's a quote. So
That's got to be the headline. I'm a goofy bitch. I
I'm a
can't help
goofy
it.
bitch, yeah. That'll be in there. Don't you worry.
Perfect.
Talking about the details in your lyrics, I mean, that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because these are not lyrics that feel, like they're just spun off of your head in a stream of consciousness. These feel very writerly and crafted and fussed, maybe not fussed over in that way, but painstakingly crafted.
Yeah, they are.
Okay, I wanted to ask you
Yeah.
about that process. I mean, does it take you, I don't know, hours, days, weeks to sort of find your way through a lyric that way?
Sometimes years.
Wow.
There's some songs like Swan Dive from the last record took me 5 years of constant work to finish it. And I think that yeah, there's songs like on the new one, like Maricopa County and that took me years.
And is
And
that
then
a
there's
process of like writing and writing and writing and throwing stuff away and writing and writing and writing? Or is that more write one line, wait 6 months, write another line, wait 6 months? You know what I mean?
the former.
Yeah.
Yeah, the former.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of, I always write way, way, way more than I ever, you know, like even a song like American Mind that it's kind of long and doesn't have a bridge or anything like that. As long as it is, it was dozens of pages, and um,
And does
even
that
though that one came to me quickly, but it relatively quickly, but then the figuring it out part took longer.
Yeah, and does all that other stuff just get thrown away, or does some of it get recycled, or
I recycle a lot.
Okay.
I try to always keep drafts of things I'm working on, on like if I'll write a lot. I kind of write in all different, I'll write by hand. I'll usually write by hand. And then when I'm like, okay, this is making headway, or I've got a lot of stuff here, then I'll move on to, my laptop, and because that's easier just to like, oh, I can move things around, but I'll make sure that I always save drafts, because the problem with writing on a laptop is you delete it and you save, it's fucking gone forever, see ya. So yeah, like a good millennial, I save drafts and I make sure that, um that that and I do, a lot of songs come from little snippets I've overheard, or like things I've misheard, or like even songs that I've misheard a line, and then I realize like, oh, that's not anything like what that person said, but I actually like this better, and I'll make those little notes in my phone, and and then that'll sometimes be a jumping off point for a song, like a magpie just picking around, or little things I see, I'm like, oh, I've got to, remember those two people sharing a cigarette and try to recreate that feeling that I had when I saw that.
So are these characters? I mean, are they? I'm guessing that they're at least partially sometimes based on real people or elements of your own personality. Do they recur? Do you see, all of your stuff as kind of one big alternate universe where all these things are going on simultaneously, or how do you think of it?
Yeah, actually, I kind of do. I do kind of see them as part of this big. That's why I have to treat them with like respect and like tell their stories how they are, because I owe it to them. But I mean, none of them are really based in anything real. They're all pretty much like, a lot of times I'll just start writing, or I'll have an idea and I'll just kind of like start disassociating and drifting off, and I can see the whole scene, like and then it's like my job to kind of transcribe the movie I'm seeing, and then write it in a way that hopefully gives the listener, not communicate the story verbatim, but like try to give the listener the feeling that I had when I saw this movie in my head, or when I heard this character in my head talking or something, or and like some of them will have a genesis in real people, but more like not really anything that I like. I'm trying to think. I really don't think that any character I've written, except for the very personal songs like Sweet Anhedonia and I Got Everything I Ever Wanted and stuff like that, are based on real people. And I never really sat down with an idea to like, okay, I'm going to write a song about this or that, every now and then, but generally it's just kind of, I just try to do justice to I don't know, to whatever you define the higher power, bigger concept of where anything comes from, but obviously I'm in all of them somehow, whether I want to be or not.
Right.
Inevitable.
It seems like that would be kind of ripe terrain for doing a bigger picture kind of thing, like an album of, a narrative that hangs together, or seeing something from a bunch of different perspectives. Is that something that you've ever thought of or wanted to do or attempted to do? I mean, it seems like it would take you exponentially longer given the amount of time you're already spending on craft.
Yeah. I don't know. I've never really thought about it doing it that way, but I mean, I could,
Are you familiar with Andy Schaaf, singer-songwriter?
Someone was actually telling me about him, like recently. I think Jesse Mangum, the guy whose studio we used for part of the record, was telling me to check him out. I haven't actually heard his music, but someone told me about him the other day.
Yeah, well, he's a singer-songwriter, and he's done 3 or 4 of these things now, where it's like one was set at a party, and so you had people observing things from different areas, and another one was kind of a narrative over the course of a night at a bar where a guy's ex-girlfriend comes back, and they have this sort of and his new one's actually the one you might like best is kind of about a serial killer stalking his next victim. So might be something to check it out. Do you actually write prose, stories, fiction, poetry, anything like that?
I tried to. I mean, I recently had my one and only piece of poetry published, which I mean, not the only one I've written. I've written a lot, but I've only had. But it's. I mean, I try to write prose, and I do enjoy. I don't know, man. I always feel like songwriting or any creative endeavor is kind of a manifestation of mental illness, and my particular flavor of mental illness is the compulsion that comes with it, is to write songs, so I'll write. Same thing with painting, like I'll go through a phase of painting, and then I'll just put it down and I won't feel a compulsion to do it for, you know, it could be months or years, you know, whereas songwriting, I feel kind of a constant compulsion to do it. So it's like, I would like to do more writing. And maybe I will. I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's hard for me to, you know, because songs exist in these very kind of obvious parameters, you know, like the music and the words inform one another, and you can tell when a song is going on too long or when it's not ready. And for poetry and prose is so open-ended that I never know when to stop. I never know if anything's working or not. I don't have that kind of instinct with it, you know. And I feel like if you're any kind of creative person, you kind of live and die by your instincts, and if you don't have good instincts, you're fucked. And I worry that I don't have good instincts when it comes to, you know, poetry or prose. I'm like, I don't know if this is working or not. With a song, you know, and sometimes you'll lie to yourself and you'll be convinced that it's working when it's not, but you know you're lying to yourself, you know.
That must be an interesting conversation.
It's exhausting.
So
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jim White, who produced this one for you. I mean, I get the sense from the press release that this was not the typical scenario where you show up at his studio with your guitar and you know, plug in and record a bunch of songs and he puts them down on tape. This was kind of a different, more elaborate, more, I don't know what, artistic process.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot more elaborate. Yeah, it was cool because in the past I've always kind of you know, we'll start playing new songs on the road. And, you know, prior to COVID, I toured a lot. And so by the time it was like, you know, oh, it's been a year, so time to make a record. I got these new songs. They would have kind of taken form because I would have been playing them already for a year or more. And so they would always kind of take shape around an acoustic guitar, you know, like that kind of, where, because these ones were all kind of ones that I hadn't, you know, were new songs and I couldn't tour any of them or play them. So I kind of went in there with these, you know, like when I'd recorded the demos of the songs or whatever, they were in a specific kind of way. But, you know, Jim, being Jim, was just like, oh, I don't hear this one like this at all. I hear it like this. And so, like, try this. And so they were able to take on all kinds of different forms that they probably wouldn't have had I had been touring them, you know, before, and B, had I not been working with Jim. You know, and he's got these very like interesting interpretations of stuff, and which is why I wanted to work with him, you know. And so it just had a chance for songs to mutate in all kinds of very weird ways, which was, you know, kind of what I was really hoping would happen.
Yeah. Did he do something? Can you think of something he did that really sort of, you know, threw you for a loop or surprised you, or you know, was a real left turn from what maybe direction you thought the song was going to go in?
I mean, one that I think of is kind of the "Shine on the Highway." It kind of was like a Leonard Cohen-esque kind of like, dung, 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 you know, like a that kind of strumming pattern. And he was like, he saw it in a whole different, you know, kind of way. And the thing with Jim is like, I realized, you know, he would be like, all right, like, play it like this, but on every third thing, just do a strum thing or whatever. And I'd do it. And we do, you know, we'd lay the track down and I'd be like, that sounds, thinking to myself, like, this sounds fucking horrible, you know? And like, Jim's like, just, I'm like, I don't know, Jim, I don't know if this is working, man. He's like, just wait. And then he'd be like, all right, now come back, and on every fourth thing, we're going to do this. And then we're going to put this, you know, and then like 45 minutes later, he played all, you know, would line up, you know, we'd turn all the tracks on and play them. It would sound amazing. And I'm just be like, how did you know it was going to sound like that? And he's just like, I don't know, I didn't. I just thought it would, you know, or like he calls them psychic bonsais. He's like,
So you think he's playing three-dimensional chess and he's just winging it, really?
No, no, I think he won't admit to playing the three-dimensional chess. You know, I don't think he's winging it at all.
Okay.
I think he just like, it's part of the, he described it. He's like, when I make a tree, I make it from the leaves first. He's like, I make psychic bonsais and I start with the leaves, not the trunk, and it's like, took me a long time to think about that. But then I was like,
Okay.
yeah, so that song went in a really weird way. Birdcage went in a really weird way. What else?
Do you think you learned anything from him that you can apply to your creative process going forward as a songwriter?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I learned more about making records from watching Jim than I did from all the other records I've made combined. I think he's just so creative and so like specific about what he, the things he'll get these great musicians to just like do these things, that are way outside of, and just the way he's able to, yeah, it's pretty inspiring. I mean, I don't think I could approach things. I don't think I could ever do what Jim does because it's so singular, and it's Jim. It's Jim White. He's but I did learn a lot about how to approach making a record, and just all the cool little, just Brothers, another one that came out very different from how how I'd written it. And yeah, I've actually kind of started the last few weeks. I was making some demos at home, and I like just ended up kind of recording a new record in the last few weeks at home using a lot of the things that Jim, I mean, I don't know if it's any good, but a lot of, of course it doesn't sound like a Jim White record because nobody can make a Jim White record except for Jim White, but it's a lot of the things that I learn about putting things together and, cinematic, he creates these very cinematic things and yeah, psychic bonsais.
Would you want to work with Jim again, or is that just something that you wouldn't want to do because you wouldn't want to repeat yourself?
I would love to work with him again. Whether he'd want to work with me again is I think I drove him kind of like we're really good friends now. It's awesome. It's one of the most rewarding things that I've experienced in music is getting to kind of
Cool.
strong arm Jim White into being my friend.
If you get some co-writes in there.
Maybe. Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think that but I remember him saying at one point, he's like, I never worked with anyone with so many ideas as you. He's like, some of them are even good.
Well, that's as close as you're going to get to a compliment from Jim White.
Hey, man, yeah. I'll take it. I love Jim. I love what he did with the record. I think I've never handed the reins over to someone before. I mean, there was a large degree of collaboration with this, but Jim was definitely the captain, and I've never done that before when making a record. When I made the record with Scott Nolan, we kind of like produced it together. And Scott's great, man. And that was such a great time making that record. And like, I loved everything about that. But this was like, that was the first time ever kind of like working with a producer at all, and that would turn out to be like more like a co-producer thing. But with Jim, it was like, like handing over the reins to someone was scary, but it worked out, so much better than I thought, even though sometimes I felt like I was going insane. Like Birdcage, he made me do like 45 different vocal takes, and I was just like at the point of threatening violence, but that's part of the fun.
Well, yeah, and it paid off. I mean, I gotta say, I've been a fan for a while, but these are some of your best songs, I think.
Thank you.
I've had Suicide of Town stuck in my head for days now. I think Jason Isbell would be happy to have written that song,
Man, that song, man, that was a huge bone of contention between Jim and I.
Why?
Because I hate that song. Like I actually wrote that song. That's one that came to me really quickly. I wrote that with my friend Jerry Fuentes from this band, the Last Bandoleros. And like he was telling me, he's like, yeah, man, your songs are great, but like you got to have a song that like draws people in so they'll listen to the rest of your miserable catalog, you know, of like your real song. So I was like, all right, bet, dude, like I'm gonna write a song that's like really catchy, but I'm gonna have the words suicide in the chorus. So we sat down and wrote it in like a few hours, you know, and I was like kind of wrote it as like a joke, or like a not a joke, but an exercise to see like, okay, can I write a really catchy song, you know, and like, and can I put suicide in the title? And we did, and then it was included in the demos that, you know, I sent Jim like 20, 30 songs, and he didn't like Sweet Anhedonia, the title track. He's like, oh, is this another one of your depressive songs? And like, not in a dismissive way, but you know, or maybe I'm hoping not in a dismissive way, but so we kind of came to a compromise that was like, okay, I'll put suicide on if you put, yeah, you know.
I mean, I'm sorry, but it's a fucking hit single, man. It's your next single. Come on.
Hey man, if it's, you know, if it brings people in to listen to the music that, you know, I mean, I did enjoy recording it. It was fun to kind of, you know, like
Rock out.
To have kind of like yeah, you know, to do something like that. So like, you know, obviously hate is a strong word. It's just a song that I feel have very mixed feelings about, you
And
know.
that is why it'll be a giant hit, so you have to play it at every show for the rest of your life.
Hey man, if it brings in that big folk dollar, I'll do, you know.
There you go.
I'm only in it for the money anyway. So
Exactly.
I'm just waiting for it all to roll in.
You can see from the luxury accommodations you are in.
You're right, exactly. Yeah.
You know, reading your bio, talking about fiction and characters and stuff, your bio reminds me, I don't know if you were ever a Cheap Trick fan, but their first album has like this long ass fake bio about their you know, lives in Europe and their South American. But you know, your bio to me reads like a work of fiction. For people who don't know, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, it says that you were raised between London and New York City.
No, there was a mistake there was a mistake in the press release that went out. The wrong press. I don't know how that got changed. So I was born in London, but I left when I was 1.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in New York City.
All right, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
It made
yeah.
it sound like you were like, you know, flying back and forth on.
Yeah, I sent an email to the folks, and I was like, because I saw it come out, and I think in y'all's album of the week thing,
Yeah.
and I was like, why is it saying this shit? And then I looked at I was like, can you send me a copy of the press release coming out? And I was like, why is it? This is not the press release that we. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. So that part is wrong, but the rest I think is correct.
So how do you become a boxer in Havana as a teenager?
Well, I started boxing when I was a kid, when I was like maybe 12. And I kind of boxed through most of my teens, and then I just kind of like, I knew that that, you know, Cuba has like the best amateur boxers, you know, in the world. They had the best boxing program. Like, you know, the Olympics until recently was only amateur boxers allowed. And so I was like 19 and realized that I could go to Cuba if I just flew through a different country, you know. And so I just literally went there, wandered around the first day asking people. I didn't even speak Spanish, you know, like very rudimentary Spanish, like where to find a boxing gym. And it turned out the gym that I found eventually was like the most famous one. And just kind of started training there. And it was where like some people from the national team trained and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it just was, and then just went from there and learned Spanish, and obviously found a Cuban girlfriend, and we moved in together, and just kind of yeah, it was a fun, weird time.
Yeah. And it obviously I don't know, kind of feeds into Palookaville a little bit, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And then you, if I've got this right again, you go back to England and
Yeah.
you do were you in a heavy metal band, or were you like a roadie for a heavy metal band, or
No, I was the guitar player and singer, and
what band was this?
it's a band called Dead Man's Root.
Okay, I never heard of them. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, we're even more obscure than I am now. I'm
Was this the doom metal thing, or?
Yeah, uh-huh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and we played for a few years, kind of toured all around, and then I was like, I'm done with this. So I moved back to the US and started doing because I was always writing these kind of songs, and you know, kind of had aspirations of, of the kind of cliche just guy with a guitar just kind of playing his songs and being out there. And so I was like, okay, this is actually my brother, who is a drummer, like basically like got into a drunken messing around with a bass player who was our best friend, and like pile drove him into the ground and broke his arm. So it was like in the middle of a tour, so we had to cancel the whole tour. And I kind of took that as like, okay, I'm just gonna, it's
That's
a
a sign.
sign.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you've also been fairly candid about your own personal issues with addiction and mental health stuff. Um, how does music factor into your recovery? I mean, is it therapeutic and cathartic for you in those ways, or is it just something that is completely removed from the personal side of it?
It's a cause of and solution to all of my problems.
The cause of. So
And
it's the
solution to.
equivalent. So it's Homer Simpson and beer is what you're saying, right?
Right, exactly. Which I think is the greatest quote, an alcohol quote ever, when he was
Yeah.
like, beer, cause of and solution to all of life's problems. Yeah, I think, no, I mean, it's definitely helped me a lot. I think maybe the, there are aspects of it that were not helpful, like the constant self-doubt, self-loathing that comes along with trying to do this, the kind of aloneness chronic aloneness that you can that comes along with it, the constant financial struggles and things like that, which is why I genuinely think like a career in this kind of stuff, or even having the compulsion to do it, is a manifestation of mental illness, but it's like, at least there's a good place to put it, because there's a lot of people suffering from all kinds of mental, emotional issues who have to go work in a bank every day,
Well, yeah,
or
exactly.
like,
You can't channel that into anything except for
right.
self-abuse in one way or the other, right?
Exactly. So, and I went the self-abuse route for a long time, and just grateful not to be there anymore. I mean, I mental health stuff is something, obviously it's a lifelong thing, for a lot of us. I'm definitely far from unique. And the drug alcohol issues are something that you have to be wary of constantly. Like recovery is a lifelong thing also, but it's a worthwhile one, and I feel grateful to be here sober talking to you right now. I'm on tour opening for Peter Case, who just walked behind me, and
Oh,
we it's great. We're like just doing it.
excellent. So you mentioned you've already kind of written the next album. I mean, that's the thing I always find is such an interesting thing talking to artists, because you're out here selling this one thing, but almost all the time they're all, it's already in the rear view for you. You're already falling
Yeah.
in love with your next album, and would probably much prefer to be playing all these brand new songs.
Yeah, I mean, there's always a degree of that. I mean, there's always a degree of it, but also, I mean, there's always the push and pull, right? Because the problem with like, the worst thing is writing the best song you've ever written, because then you're like, well, now what? It's done. Like, what do I do? So I think it's like I try to stay present and grateful that I have any songs that anyone wants to hear at all, and that people like the records, and then hopefully they like the new one, and I feel grateful to be playing that, and I feel grateful to be able to keep kind of tinkering away on other stuff. I try to remove myself from this concept of like product. You got to always be making product.
Yeah.
So for me, it's just like, yeah, I'm a songwriter. I've got to write songs.
Yeah. Do you think though maybe the next album will come a little faster than 2 years?
Yeah, I think the thing with this, it was like this is the first record I put out on like a real label, the one that the Sweet Anhedonia. So it's like there's always for which I'm super grateful. But it like takes longer, those kind of things. Or they can, and so yeah, I mean I usually like my goal is to just to keep myself honest is to like put a record out every 2 years. So like this one was about 6 months behind schedule, but the record was done. It just was the various
Supply chain issues.
oh yeah, legitimately that too, with the vinyl. It's like the CDs are out, but because of the I'm sure you know all about the vinyl shit show, but yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, I think that's all I got for you. Did we talk about everything that we should have gotten into?
You tell me.
I think so.
I think so. Yeah, I think so too.
All right. Well, listen,
Yeah.
this was great. Thanks for your time today. Thanks
Yeah,
for
thank you.
thanks for the best album you've made yet. And I say yet because I know there's going to be a better one.
Thank you. That really means a lot, and thank you for just being such an awesome supporter of what I do. I really do mean that what I said about that review, that the one for Shadowland is like my all-time favorite review that anyone's done of any of my records.
Thanks a lot for saying that. You make it easy. When it's a great album, it's easy. It's when you're sitting there trying to go, okay, what do I say about this?
Yeah.
But no, I don't have that problem. So you're going to come back to Canada to see us sometime soon, or what?
Man, I would love to. Where are you based out of in Canada?
I'm in Winnipeg, man.
Oh shit, that's right.
Yeah.
My favorite place in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, I know Scott and Paul.
Yeah, and Jeff and all those dudes. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, hopefully then soon. I Winnipeg is my favorite place in Canada.
There you go.
I tell people like it's awesome. So yeah, hopefully, man, I'd really like to try to make it out this year. Hopefully, it can make it happen.
Cool. Well, when you do, drop me a line, and I'd say first beers on me, but I'll buy you a coffee.
Yeah, that's perfect.